She was the backup dancer nobody noticed, until the day Korea's biggest K-pop idol collapsed on stage and she had to save his life with a secret she'd been hiding for 10 years. He woke up in the hospital, looked directly into her eyes, and said the 5 words that changed everything: "I can see your memories now." This is the story of how a black American dancer with a mysterious past became the only person who could save Korea's most famous idol from a fate worse than death. Stay until the very end, because the twist will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, if you love intense Afro-Korean stories with mystery and romance, smash that like button. Subscribe and hit notifications because I drop these addictive stories weekly. Comment hidden gift if you believe some people are destined to find each other. Now let's get into this story. Zara Williams had been invisible her entire life, and she preferred it that way. At 26 years old, she'd perfected the art of blending into the background, which was exactly what you wanted when you were a backup dancer for one of Korea's biggest entertainment companies. She'd moved to Seoul 4 years ago after a career-ending injury destroyed her dreams of dancing on Broadway. Her parents thought she was crazy, leaving Houston to start over in a country where she'd always stand out. But Zara had her reasons. Reasons she'd never told anyone. Reasons that woke her up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat from dreams that weren't actually dreams at all. She had a gift. Or maybe it was a curse, depending on how you looked at it. Zara could see memories. Not her own, but other people's. One touch of skin-to-skin contact and images would flood her mind. Flashes of moments from someone else's life, playing like a movie she couldn't pause or stop. She'd had it since she was 16, when a car accident that should have killed her somehow didn't. She woke up in the hospital 3 days later with her grandmother sitting beside her bed. And the moment her grandmother touched her hand, Zara saw everything. Her grandmother's childhood in Jim Crow, Alabama. Her first love. The baby she'd lost before Zara's mother was born. Secrets that had been buried for decades. It terrified her. For years, Zara wore gloves constantly, avoided physical contact, built walls between herself and everyone around her. She learned to control it eventually, learned to block most of it out, but it never fully went away. Korea offered her something America never could: anonymity. In Seoul, she was just another foreign backup dancer. One of dozens. Nobody looked at her twice. Nobody tried to know her story. Nobody touched her casually the way Americans did with their hugs and handshakes. She could disappear into the choreography, lose herself in the music, and pretend she was normal. She'd been dancing backup for the group Eclipse for 8 months. They were massive. Sold-out world tours, millions of fans, endorsement deals worth more than most people made in a lifetime. The leader and main vocalist was Kim Jae-won. 28 years old, absurdly talented, devastatingly handsome, and according to everyone who worked with him, completely untouchable. Not in a mean way. He was always polite, always professional. But there was a distance to him. Like he was performing even when the cameras weren't rolling. Zara understood that better than anyone. She recognized someone else who was hiding. The day everything changed started like any other. They were rehearsing for the Seoul leg of their world tour. Zara was in the back row of dancers, running through the choreography for their opening number. Jae-won was center stage, going through his parts. His voice filled the practice room, perfect as always. They'd been rehearsing for 6 hours straight and everyone was exhausted, but nobody complained. You didn't complain in K-pop. You pushed through until you got it perfect, then you pushed some more. They were halfway through the song when Zara noticed something wrong. Jae-won's voice cracked slightly, which never happened. She looked up and saw him sway on his feet. The choreographer didn't notice. The other dancers didn't notice. But Zara saw. She watched as Jae-won's face went pale. Watched as his hand went to his chest. Watched as his knees buckled. She was moving before she thought about it. Pushing through the other dancers, reaching him just as he collapsed. She caught him and they went down together, his head in her lap. And then skin touched skin. Her hand against his neck, checking for a pulse. And the memory slammed into her like a tidal wave. She saw everything. A little boy practicing vocals until his throat bled. A teenager signing a contract with shaking hands. Years of brutal schedules and impossible expectations. The pills he'd started taking to stay awake, to perform, to be perfect. The mounting pressure that was crushing him slowly. The desperation that had led him to a dangerous black market stimulant 3 days ago. The same stimulant currently stopping his heart. Zara gasped and pressed both hands to his chest. She could see it in his memories. He was dying. The stimulant was causing cardiac arrest, and if she didn't do something right now, he would die on this practice room floor. She started CPR, ignoring the screaming chaos around her. Someone was calling an ambulance. Someone was crying. She didn't stop. She pressed down on his chest, counting compressions. And between each push, she saw more. She saw his first love, a trainee who'd been cut from the company. She saw his secret exhaustion, how he'd smile for cameras then collapse alone in his apartment. She saw the letter he'd written last week, just in case, telling his members he was sorry for being weak. She saw everything, and it broke her heart. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. The paramedics took over and Zara stumbled back, her hands shaking. One of the other dancers caught her, asking if she was okay. But Zara couldn't speak. She was still seeing his memories. Still feeling the echo of his pain. Jae-won survived. The hospital managed to stabilize him and the company put out a statement about exhaustion and dehydration. Fans sent flowers and concerned messages. The members of Eclipse took turns staying at the hospital. Zara went back to her tiny apartment and tried to forget what she'd seen. Tried to block out the memories that weren't hers but wouldn't leave her alone. She knew things about Kim Jae-won that no one else knew. Intimate, terrifying things. She knew he was suffering, and she knew if something didn't change, he would try again. Maybe not with pills. Maybe he'd just work himself to death. Either way, the ending was the same. She told herself it wasn't her problem. She was just a backup dancer. She'd saved his life and that was enough. She didn't owe him anything else. But 3 days later, when she showed up for practice, the choreographer told her Jae-won had requested to see her. Requested wasn't really the right word. Korea's biggest idol didn't request. He summoned. Zara found him in a private studio on the top floor. He was sitting on the couch, looking thinner than he had before, dark circles under his eyes. He stood when she entered and bowed slightly. "Thank you for saving my life." His voice was quiet. "You're welcome." Zara stayed near the door, ready to run. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said the words that made her blood run cold. "I can see your memories now. Everything you saw in my head, I can see in yours. We're connected somehow, and I need to understand why." Zara's first instinct was to deny everything. To run. To get on the next plane back to America and never look back. But something in Jae-won's eyes stopped her. He looked as terrified as she felt. They sat in that practice room for 4 hours and told each other truths they'd never told anyone. Jae-won explained that he'd woken up in the hospital with images in his head that weren't his. He saw Houston. Saw a car crash. Saw a teenage girl waking up with a power she didn't understand. He saw Zara's life like she'd seen his. The connection went both ways. He'd researched it obsessively. Couldn't find any scientific explanation. Couldn't tell anyone without sounding insane. Zara told him everything about her gift. How it started. How she'd learned to control it. How scared she'd been her whole life of being discovered, of being treated like a freak. They were connected now, in a way neither of them understood. Two people who'd spent their lives hiding, suddenly completely visible to each other. It should have been horrifying, and it was. But it was also the most relief Zara had felt in 10 years. Someone finally knew. Someone finally understood. Jae-won felt it too. She could see it in his memories. The desperate loneliness of being famous but never truly known. Over the next few weeks, they started meeting in secret. Late at night in empty practice rooms, or early morning in quiet cafes where nobody would recognize him behind a mask and baseball cap. They talked about everything. Their childhoods, their fears, their dreams. Zara learned that Jae-won had wanted to be a veterinarian before K-pop. That he missed his family but couldn't show weakness by admitting it. That he wrote songs late at night that would never be released because they were too personal, too raw. Jae-won learned that Zara had a younger sister she hadn't spoken to in 3 years because she was afraid of seeing her memories. That she sometimes missed Texas so much it physically hurt. That she'd given up on love, because how could you be intimate with someone when touching them meant drowning in their past? They understood each other in a way no one else could. They didn't have to explain or pretend. They could just be. The feelings that developed were inevitable. Zara tried to fight it. This was impossible. He was Korea's biggest idol and she was nobody. Even without the memory connection, the gap between their worlds was insurmountable. But Jae-won didn't see it that way. He'd spent his whole life being Kim Jae-won, the idol, the product, the fantasy. With Zara, he could just be Jae-won. Just a person. He could be messy and scared and real. The first time he kissed her was in a practice room at 2 a.m. They'd been running through choreography. He was teaching her the main dancer's part, just for fun. His hand had brushed hers and they'd both frozen as memories flowed between them. But this time it wasn't the past they were seeing. It was feelings. Emotions. The way he felt when he looked at her. The way she felt when he smiled. It was overwhelming and beautiful. And when he leaned in and kissed her, Zara didn't pull away. She kissed him back. And for the first time in 10 years, she wasn't afraid of the connection. She wanted it. They started a relationship that had to be kept absolutely secret. In Korea, dating was complicated for idols. Dating a backup dancer was career suicide. Dating a black foreign backup dancer would cause a scandal that could destroy everything Jaewon had worked for. Zara understood this. She knew the rules. But understanding didn't make it hurt less when they had to pretend to be strangers in public. When she had to watch him flirt with actresses at award shows for publicity. When fans would scream about shipping him with female idols and she had to smile like it didn't matter. Their relationship existed in stolen moments. In secret meetings. In text messages sent at 3 a.m. in code. It was beautiful and painful and unsustainable. The breaking point came 6 months later. Eclipse was preparing for their biggest comeback yet. The choreography was intense and required close partner work between Jaewon and the main backup dancer. A position that had just been given to Zara after months of proving herself. She'd earned it legitimately. Her skills were undeniable. But the moment the partnership was announced, the hate started. Online forums exploded with racist vitriol. How dare a black woman touch their oppa? How dare she be center stage with Jaewon? Who did she think she was? The comments were vicious. Death threats appeared in her DMs. Someone found out where she lived and left threatening notes on her door. The company's solution was to reassign her. Put her back in the back row. Give the position to someone less controversial. Jaewon fought them. Threatened to refuse to perform. But the company had leverage. They owned his contract, his image, his entire life. If he pushed too hard, they'd simply terminate Zara's contract entirely, and he'd never see her again. Zara made the decision for him. She went to the company and resigned. Told them she was moving back to America. It was better this way. Cleaner. She couldn't live in the shadows forever. Couldn't watch Jaewon destroy his career for her. Couldn't keep hiding. She loved him enough to let him go. Jaewon found out 2 hours before her flight. He showed up at her apartment still in stage makeup from a music show filming. He'd run out in the middle of recording. His managers were losing their minds. He didn't care. Don't go, he said, his hands cupping her face. Memories flowing between them. All their moments together. All the love they'd been too scared to say out loud. I can't do this without you. But Zara shook her head, crying. You have to. This is your dream. Your life. I won't let you give it up for me. What kind of life is it if you're not in it? Jaewon asked. And Zara didn't have an answer. The compromise they reached was impossible, but it was all they had. Zara would go back to America. Jaewon would finish his contract, which had 3 more years. When he was finally free, when he'd fulfilled his obligations, when he could make his own choices, he'd come find her. 3 years. It might as well have been a lifetime. They spent that last night together, memorizing each other. Touching skin to skin. Sharing every memory, every feeling, every moment. Creating new memories to sustain them through the separation. When Zara got on the plane the next morning, she felt like she was leaving half her soul behind. She moved back to Houston. Got a job teaching dance at a local studio. Tried to build a normal life. She dated other people, but it never worked. How could it, when she'd already met the person who understood her completely? She kept tabs on Jaewon through fan accounts and news articles. Watched him smile on variety shows and wondered if he was as lonely as she was. Their connection didn't fade with distance. Sometimes, late at night, she'd feel a rush of emotion that wasn't hers, and she'd know he was thinking of her. Sometimes he'd text, just a simple how are you, and they'd talk until dawn about nothing and everything. 3 years felt like an eternity, but time moved forward whether they wanted it to or not. On the day Jaewon's contract ended, Zara was teaching an intermediate jazz class when her phone buzzed. She ignored it, professional to the end. But when class finished and she checked her messages, her heart stopped. It was a photo. Jaewon, standing in an airport. No mask, no disguise. Just him. The caption read, I'm free. Coming to find you. He arrived in Houston 2 days later. Zara picked him up from the airport, and when she saw him standing there with a single backpack, looking nervous and hopeful and real, she started crying. They stood in the middle of the arrivals terminal, holding each other. Memories flowing between them. 3 years of loneliness and longing and love that never died. I'm not going back, Jaewon said into her hair. I'm done with that life. I want a real one. With you. It wasn't easy. Jaewon had walked away from K-pop at the height of his fame. The Korean media called him selfish and ungrateful. Fans felt betrayed. His former company threatened lawsuits. But Jaewon didn't care. He'd spent 10 years being what everyone else wanted. Now he was choosing himself. Choosing them. He enrolled in veterinary school, like he'd always wanted. Got a part-time job at a dog shelter. Started living like a normal person. The adjustment was hard. He'd never grocery shopped alone. Never paid his own bills. Never had to figure out bus routes. Zara taught him everything, patient and kind, watching him discover who he was outside of being an idol. They got married a year later. A small ceremony with just Zara's family and a few close friends. Jaewon's family watched via video call, still not ready to publicly support his choices, but privately glad he was happy. Zara wore her grandmother's wedding dress. And when Jaewon took her hand at the altar, both of them gasped as memories flooded in. Not of the past this time, but of the future. Somehow, they could see it. A little girl with Zara's smile and Jaewon's eyes. A house full of rescue dogs. Quiet Sunday mornings and loud Friday nights. A life built on truth and love and the courage to choose each other over everything else. The gift that had once felt like a curse had led them here. To this moment. To each other. Maybe it had always been leading them here. Two people who needed to be truly seen, finding the only person in the world who could see all of them. The girl who could see memories and the boy who'd been hiding behind a perfect mask. Both finally free. Both finally home. You ready for this? Jaewon whispered as the officiant began. Zara squeezed his hand and smiled. I've been ready since the moment you collapsed into my arms. And for the first time in both their lives, they weren't afraid of the future. Because they could see it, and it was beautiful.